Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where I record conversations with tech leaders from my little home office here in the UK, where I've just been told that we've got to expect semi-lockdown for the next 6 months. But thankfully we've got each other, right? Now, the fact we can communicate with each other all over the world and I can beam my voice into your ears every day has to be a great thing, depending on what speed you listen to your podcasts on, because I know some of you listen to podcasts at 2 times speed to get through them quicker and listen to more episodes. But for those people, I might sound like a chipmunk, which is never a good thing. But today, I've got a great story to share with you all from over in the US, because WeeCare, in case you're not familiar, are the largest network of in-home childcare in the United States, and they help parents and childcare providers find and provide childcare without all the stress that normally comes along with it, and everything's working like a dream. But then the pandemic hit. Childcare centres are closing. So what did they do? Well, they built an AI-powered temperature check technology and put that into their app so family and daycares can verify that they are healthy before interacting each day. And that temperature check technology proved to be so popular that they created a separate app called Fever Free that spread to businesses in all industries to use and reopen safely. And from that, Business Insider and USA Today and several other big names in the media have done stories on that tech behind Fever Free, which, although they built originally to keep their 2,000 plus WeeCare day businesses safe and open, it's led to other areas too, and all that put them on my radar. So today, WeeCare Co-Founder Matt Reilly joins us on the podcast to share a little bit more information about the Fever Free app and how their team built it to help businesses, schools and entire cities reopen. But also restaurants are also using it to keep employees and customers safe. Assisted living facilities are also signing up to keep elderly patients and staff safe too. So I think this is a great story. So buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears all the way to Los Angeles so we can speak with Matt right now. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Matt. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure, yeah. Thanks for having me, Neil. So my name is Matt Reilly. I'm the co-founder of WeeCare. I run our product and marketing teams. And, I've been in tech for about 15 years now and got tired of building other people's businesses. And so decided I was going to create my own. I built my first VC-backed business in 2014, which is a company called Alpha Draft. It was essentially daily fantasy sports, but for esports. So think FanDuel or DraftKings, but instead of professional sports, we like to think of it as the other side of the playground. We were really focused on the esports and video games and the professional industry that was happening around that. So that was a rocket ship of a business that was launched, built, and sold within the course of about 16 months. And since then, I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of great companies on the product and growth side. So my current venture is WeeCare, which is essentially a childcare matchmaking marketplace for parents. And then on the other side of the marketplace, we've built a business-in-a-box toolkit for childcare providers to help make their lives easier and help facilitate better care and education for kids ages 0 to 6. And eventually that has led into Fever Free, our COVID mitigation app, but I think we'll probably talk about that a little later.
Excellent. Been so busy, and it's an incredibly cool story as well. And I love the diversity there from esports to childcare. But before we talk about how you're making a difference in that world by leveraging technology, I'd love to learn a little bit more about where it all began. So I've got to ask, where did your passion for technology come from, and what put you on this path that led to where you are right now?
I mean, I would say it started off at a very early age. I was an only child, so I've always had to find ways to entertain myself, and puzzles and games were a part of that. And then early on, my family got a computer, and so I had always been tinkering and toying around with what I could do on the computer, which was pretty limited at that point, but would play with Linux, would try to build websites. I actually built a website around a video game clan or group that I had started with Wolfenstein 3D. And that was where I just started to love technology. And that really continued on. As I got to college, I ended up building my first business, which I wouldn't necessarily call a full business, but it was my first foray into business, where I got to see not only the technology component, but also the creation of the business processes, the marketing, the sales, everything. And that was really where it went from a love of technology to a love of technology business. And so after college, I was fortunate enough to meet a friend who invited me to join their online marketing consultancy, where we had the opportunity to work with a bunch of hot Series A, Series B businesses and help them with growth. And so that really solidified my space, or my desire to be in startups, and almost more so too than the technology itself, but the people that I was working with, the CEOs that I got to learn from, the technology experts. All of that has just created this insatiable passion for technology and what it can do.
And correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe that WeeCare is now the largest network of in-home childcare in the whole of the US. But can you tell me a little bit more about that and the role that technology plays in what you do at WeeCare?
Yeah, I mean, so technology basically runs all of WeeCare. And the idea for WeeCare came out of a lack of technology. My co-founder, Jessica, she came up with this idea from a personal need, because she herself got pregnant and went through the process of trying to find care. And then even when you find care, it was incredibly expensive with long wait lists, and the quality of education just wasn't really there. She came from an education background, and so she didn't feel like it was really sufficient. And, the most development that happens for a child happens from the ages of 0 to 6. And so we wanted to be able to leverage technology to be able to create an environment where education was accessible for all. And when we started looking into the childcare industry, we realized that 60% of the industry is not your centers or your preschools. It's really the in-home side of things. And no one was really supporting those businesses at the time. There were different tools here and there, but for the most part, nothing that brought it all together. And so, we're looking at other businesses like Uber and Lyft and other companies that have created business in a box sort of solutions. And we wanted to be able to do that for childcare providers. We wanted to systematize that process so that they would be able to not only earn more money, but more importantly, I think, is they would have the time to do the things that they love to do, so that they could put their energy into the kids when they were with them. And, just as a small anecdote, childcare can be a really difficult and sometimes thankless business. You're working with kids 8 to 12 hours a day, and then you still need to run a small business on top of that, which can be exhausting. So we felt like we could solve a lot of those problems through technology. And by doing that, we could draw more amazing talent in terms of educators into starting their own businesses, which would ultimately increase the supply. And the goal is solving the childcare crisis that we're currently seeing in the United States.
Love that. And I love how you got a problem that you experienced firsthand and then turned to technology to fix it. And of course, from there, feels like everything was working like a dream. You solved the problem. And then, like any business leader, things quickly changed with the arrival of the pandemic. So can you tell me how that initially affected what you do at WeeCare?
Yeah, I mean, as you can imagine, the pandemic has impacted every person in one way or another, and a lot of businesses have taken a big hit. And for us, childcare, even though it's such a critical thing, there was a moment there where things seemed to grind to a halt. Pre-COVID, we were growing 30% month over month. And then once the pandemic hit, I mean, people weren't looking for care. Parents were back at home with their kids. Even the parents that did need childcare, they were still very skeptical about taking their kids to, let's say a new daycare where, they might be potentially exposing themselves and their families to COVID in this case, or, even just other germs or infectious diseases. And so, we knew that this was pretty important for us to be on top of. And luckily, we were pretty proactive. My co-founder, Jessica, she's from China. She still has family there. And so we were watching closely and kind of had an inside scoop, too, about what was going on. And we were watching, how were they trying to mitigate the spread? And one of those ways that they were doing that was through fever checks. And so we really kind of latched on to that one piece in the very beginning. And even before, things really hit the fan in the United States, before cities started shutting down and businesses started shutting down, we had our first iteration of what would ultimately become feverfree.ai.
And like you said, from that moment, you turned to tech once again to build an AI-powered temperature check technology and put it into your app. So can you tell me a little bit more about Fever Free and the problems that you're solving with that too? Because again, there's a common theme here throughout your story, and it's great to hear. And probably, I hope, will give a little bit of inspiration to other founders too.
Yeah, sure. Well, before we get into the Fever Free app, I think it's important to contextualize how it was created, because it wasn't this just like idea that popped out of nowhere, that we needed to build AI-driven video fever checks and everything else that Fever Free has come to exist as currently. What it first started as was that with WeeCare, we have over 2,000 daycares, and we knew we needed to keep them safe. And at that point, I'm sure your email box was also blowing up with every business talking about what are the ways to keep your employees or members safe? It was like pamphlets on hand washing best practices and how to keep things clean. And while all of that stuff is incredibly important, we just felt like it wasn't sufficient. It wasn't enough. And so we had built a technology platform in WeeCare, and we wanted to be able to leverage that. So, our main goal was just keeping our daycares healthy and safe, and for the providers, kids, and the families. And then, as a byproduct, we're trying to make sure that we, prevent disenrollment and also make parents who are coming in try to feel safe. So, that was really where this thing sort of came from. And there was no AI component in the very beginning. We had a tool, or have a tool, that allows daycare providers to share videos of the kids while they're at childcare. And so, one of our team members was like, what if we allowed our daycare providers to be able to take a video of themselves, like a selfie video, that showed them as they took their temperature, and they showed the temperature in the video. And by doing that, we could say, okay, this person doesn't have a fever. And so we could mark them as fever free for the day. that ultimately rolled into, well, we should also do that for the families that attend daycare so that we can make sure that every single person was safe. And at this point, we were literally like passing videos to our team. Our team was going through, watching the videos and tagging the temperature and whether there was a fever or not. So there was no AI component of what was originally created. But as you can imagine, with 2,000 daycares, and then you multiply that by the kids and families who are at the daycare, things began getting a little bit overwhelming as far as the number of temperature checks that were coming into the system, and our team's ability to, go through all of those while also accomplishing everything else that we were trying to accomplish. So that then led to us wanting to build the AI component. And, this turned into, it started off with like when COVID hit and I told you that we took a dip, what we did was we started working with a lot of essential work organizations. And one of the main reasons why they wanted to work with WeeCare was because of this technology. You can imagine that if, we're working with a hospital and they have an outbreak in the hospital, that is probably one of the worst things that could happen. And so they started asking us if they could use the technology for their own businesses. And that's what started to get the wheels turning about maybe this is really way larger than just WeeCare. Maybe there's an opportunity here to help every business to be able to operate safely, operate healthy, and make sure that their communities stay safe.
And what I love about that story is if we put all the technology to one side, you've not just gone out there and put tech out there and thought, well, what can we solve now? It's solution-based first and building fever-free to keep your 2,000 plus WeeCare daycare businesses safe and open. But of course, the media quickly picked up on this too, and especially on how you're using tech to fight COVID. So can you share some of the feedback and the kind of news coverage that you quickly picked up from them?
Yeah, so it really started out with the WeeCare getting press because of the essential work organizations that we were working with and how we were helping them. We were able to establish partnerships with a bunch of state and local municipalities, LA City being one of those big partnerships. And we were providing essential services on the childcare side. And because of that, and then parlaying that into the release of Fever Free as its own standalone app, I mean, that has been really the driving factor here in continuing to get press and coverage. And for us, I think that press and coverage has been critical. It helped us to be able to get off the ground. It helped us to go from just a tool that was helping daycares to a tool that is now helping every type of business who wants to reopen safely to do so.
So for everyone listening, then, how does Fever Free work? Can you talk me through that and how easy it is to get up and running?
Yeah, so I mean, getting up and running can literally happen over the course of a day, depending on the structure of your organization. But basically what happens is an organization will go in there and they will set up all their settings. So that can be anything from, what temperature represents a fever, what are symptoms that are prohibited, what happens if someone has a fever, how are you currently doing your allowing people into the facility, managing attendance, those sort of things. And so they'll set up all of those settings and then they invite their employees. They're able to, through the Fever Free app, are able to submit daily health checks. And so a daily health check really consists of a video fever check where you're taking your temperature using a digital thermometer and then showing the temperature at the end of the video so that we can see what the temperature is. And then after that, based on your fever and symptom checks, if you are cleared, you'll get a clearance badge. And that clearance badge is an animated badge that you can hold up and is visible within 6 feet and will show that you and any other members of your household are cleared to arrive. So you can imagine how important that is, especially with schools or large organizations where you have, thousands of people who are coming in on a daily basis. There's no way that you can have everyone stand in a line and be booped by a thermometer and go through a symptom check process. They need something that allows that to be facilitated beforehand. So those clearance badges allow our organizations to easily manage the flow of traffic. And then on the other side, if there is a failure, the organizations are able to set up automated protocol. And so that protocol lets the organization user know what are the next steps that they need to take in order to come back into whatever the organization is. Additionally, we, on the business and organization side, we also allow organizations to be able to log attendance, because just because someone submitted a health check doesn't mean they necessarily came. And in the case where an issue does arise, we want to be able to know who needs to be contacted in order to be able to make sure that they themselves are clear or safe and healthy. In all of this, there is so much regulation that is constantly changing. And so we're really working to help the organizations to better facilitate the management of both healthy and unhealthy workers. And so a lot of what has come about from this too is workflow management, which, is funny because ultimately, that's where we created WeeCare, was to help workflow and business management. And now a lot of the tools are almost one-to-one from one platform to the other.
For any business leaders or decision makers that are listening and thinking, that's an incredibly cool idea, and they're going to rush into their office, tell their IT director or their CTO, and we're instantly going to ask them a few tech questions. So I've got to ask, for those people, what is the technology that makes all this possible?
Yeah. So it's been a constant evolution, as I mentioned before. There was no AI component that first started this. And then, at first we started with some out of the box sort of machine learning to just help us to be able to log the information properly. But over time, it has evolved to be something so much more than that. So much more reliable. And so the way that the technology works and the intelligence works is that first what we do is we look for we have person detection. And so we're looking to make sure that it is actually a person who is taking their temperature within the video, whether that person is the same person that took it yesterday. And then we also look for device detection. So we want to make sure that this is actually a thermometer being used, not something like a calculator or someone writing on a piece of paper or something like that. And then the final component is the machine vision, which really then reads what that temperature is, so that we can log it and make sure that there is not a fever based on whatever the organization's settings are. So that's the basics of the technology, and I could probably talk about that for hours, but and then the other component of the technology, I'd say, is just the people that are behind it. We have an incredible technology team that is moving incredibly quickly. They're creating amazing products. We are so focused on, given that this is a health-related space, that we're in compliance with state and local standards, HIPAA compliance, OSHA, those sort of things. And so we have an incredible tech team that makes all of this possible.
Love it. And from a personal point of view, it's a pretty big question, this, so I apologize in advance, but what lessons have you learned this year, and where do you go from here?
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson for us is adaptability. Yeah. We've had to read the tea leaves, so to speak, and make sure that we're trying to be a step ahead of everything. Our goal is to, shorten this pandemic as much as we possibly can. And so our team being adaptable and working with our clients and customers and state and local governments and municipalities to understand what's coming up, that has been, I think, our biggest strength. Another thing is persistence. I mean, one of the wildest stories was when we were trying to get this off the ground. We actually had Fever Free ready to launch about a month before it actually went live. And that was because we got stuck in the App Store's review process in an infinite loop of feedback and needs that they were asking for. We had to get endorsements from, government entities and local entities. And, that's a roller coaster. All startups and all businesses are a roller coaster, but it's really tough when you're trying to get something off the ground and you see how valuable it can be. And, you're getting blocked from a black box, essentially. And I think the last thing that I'd say that has really come out of this is our focus on prioritization. Given that now that we have both WeeCare and Fever Free, we need to be hyper-focused on what is most important and what makes the biggest impact. And so there have been a ton of lessons learned around how we prioritize what is the most important thing that we're doing. And as far as, what's coming next, like I said, our goal is to end this pandemic and help every business to get back to work and people return to some form of normalcy, and make sure everybody's safe in that process. And I think for us, we are now that we're getting so deep into the AI, we're looking and saying, well, what are the other areas where we can leverage this technology that we've created or enhance the technology for other purposes? So, I don't think that health is, even when the pandemic goes away, health has now gotten a new focus, at least from the employer perspective. And so I think there's a lot of things that we're going to be focusing on to help employers manage the health and wellness of their organizations.
Well, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today, sharing your story. But before I do let you go, could you just remind everyone listening where they can find you guys online, and equally contact your team if they're left with any questions after our conversation today?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're interested in the feverfree.ai technology, you can go to feverfree.ai and you will be able to sign up, and our team will get back to you within 24 hours. On the WeeCare side, you can go to WeeCare.co, and if you're looking for childcare, we can absolutely help you find a safe childcare provider who will really help your child in the most formidable years of their life.
Well, there's so much I love about your story, and especially your journey going from esports to WeeCare to Fever Free. And one of the things that really stands out is your adaptability, and not just your adaptability, but the adaptability of you, your team, and your business, and how you've all evolved like that technology that you're leveraging to bring your solutions to life. And so many valuable lessons in that. But more than anything, just a big thank you for taking the time to share that with everyone today. Thanks again, Matt.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Neil.
I love how WeeCare reacted to the prospect of 2,000 plus daycare businesses closing by creating Fever Free, which allows organisations to verify all individuals are healthy before interacting each day through virtual fever and symptom checks. And of course, if we take a look under the hood, it's all powered by their patent-pending AI. And K-12 schools and preschool centres have also signed up to implement Fever Free as part of their reopening plans. And like I said at the beginning of the podcast, restaurants are also using it to keep employees and customers safe, and assisted living facilities are also signing up to keep elderly patients and staff members healthy too. And that list goes on and on. And I do see many businesses just trying to carry on regardless with the old way of doing things and the old business models. But for me, this story highlights the importance of evolving and adapting with the landscape and the changing times. I think there's some big lessons in that. But over to you. Email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. You can reach me on Twitter at Neil C. Hughes, and my website is techblogwriter.co.uk. Keep your questions coming in. And if you'd like to come on the podcast too, keep those emails coming in. Whatever it is that you need, whatever it is you want to talk about, I'm here to serve you. That's why I do this podcast. So hopefully you'll join me again tomorrow. But until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.